All right. So in the last couple videos, we talked about the basics of setting up columns, rows and columns using CSS grids. And when I talked about rows and columns, I kind of used the idea of like a spreadsheet, right? And I think this is a good analogy because a lot of things you can do with spreadsheets or Microsoft Excel or whatever you want to call it are things you can do with like CSS grids. Okay. So just like when I have a spreadsheet, you have columns, right? And you can set the size of those columns, which is basically what we just did, right? Except we use CSS as opposed to manually dragging something. But sometimes, so right now I have like a two-column layout. And actually, let me kind of do it like this. I'm going to set up like a three-column layout. So let's say cell 3, cell 6. Cell 9, I'm doing fine. And so I got a three-column layout here, right? And by default, it's like if I have a table cell, it's, let's pretend they're all, exactly the same width, they're all the same dimension, they're all 1/3. But let's just say for the sake of argument, I want this one cell here to not be 1/3, but 2/3, right? In other words, I want these to combine. Now, I don't want this column to be 2/3. I just want that one cell to be 2/3. So in other words, what I'm trying to do is take these two cells, because each of these is a third, and I'm trying to like merge them. Okay. So if you were using something like Microsoft Excel or something like that, that would be something like this, merge. Oops, did I not? There you go. See how I merge these two so this one cell spans more than one column, right? And I could even do it like this. So this one cell is now spanning over three columns. And if I were to use like alignment, if I align it to the right, rather than aligning to the right here, which is how most of these would work, where it's aligning to the cell and it's 1/3, it's going all the way over here. Or if I were to, align it to the center, that would be how that would, work. So we're going to do something like that. I'm going to go to exercise 8. And what I'm going to do, just like always, let's kind of look at my setup. So I have a container. And I have these section tags. They're all like kind of candies. A lot of them are kind of like obscure ones that probably don't even exist anymore. And I've set this up as a three-column layout. Okay. So let's take a look at that. Boom. All right. And what I want to do is I want the M&Ms to go more than one column. Okay. I want it to expand from here to there. Okay. So what we can do, or what you should understand, is when we create a layout with columns with CSS grids, we get what are called track markers. Okay. And there are track markers that go horizontally, and there's also track markers that go vertically. The horizontal track markers go before your first column, and then they go between each column. Okay, so they're not the column itself, they're between the columns. Okay, so if I have a three-column layout, there's track 1 or track 2, track 3, and there's always one at the beginning and the end, and then there's one in between each column. Okay. An easy way to see this is if you have a grid going on, if you're using like Chrome or Firefox, you should have if you have a more modern browser, which hopefully you will have a recent one, you should see this little option here that says grid. I can click on that and I'm going to click on layout, and it is showing the tracks, but they're kind of hard to see. So I'm going to go under color. I really wish I could make it not peach because I feel like I'm going to make them blue. And you can actually literally see the track numbers here. 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay. So why am I showing you this? Because we can use these track numbers to expand a column or a table cell, I should say, or a child more than one column. Okay. So the way that it works is that when you see these track numbers, that is the starting place of the column. So in other words, M&M's starts on track 1. Butterfingers starts on track 2. Skittles starts on track 3. Okay. You guys kind of see that? See how that's like starting right there? So how do we use this? Well, what I could say is, all right, M&M's is starting on track 1, and I want it to span 1, 2 columns. Okay. How would we write that? Well, so in this case, before when we were doing this, we were trying to affect the entire grid. And when you're trying to affect the entire grid, that is actually, you should be affecting the parent because the parent is what's affecting the grid. This is what's setting the grid and how many rows and columns and things like that, and gaps and things between the rows and columns. When you want to affect a specific cell, that is the actual child. So here, if I'm trying to affect M&Ms, I need to affect just this one, not everything. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is this has an ID of M&M or MM. And what I'm going to say here is grid column start. Okay. So you could say, well, all right, it's starting on track 1. And or actually, it's what this is saying is wherever the grid is starting, let's have it span. And this is how many columns. Okay, so the word span means go more than one column. And then this is how many columns. All right. So what this is saying is take the M&M wherever it starts. This is where it starts, track 1, and go 1, 2. Okay. The result's going to be, see how it's going 1, 2, 3. Because 1, if you start on 1 and you span 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3. And then I get something like this. Okay. So you can have it span as many columns, as many columns as you want, as long as there are that many columns. So if I wanted to span 3 columns, let's have it span 3 columns. Okay. If I tried to span it more than the number of columns, you're going to get kind of some weird results. So I don't actually have 4 columns. So what it's actually doing here is like adding an additional column, and that's kind of like messing this up. So I really wouldn't recommend you do something like that. I would really just use the number of columns that you have. I'm just going to span it 2 columns. We can also do the same concept of spanning, but rather than spanning columns, we can span rows. Okay, and once again, this is very similar to how an Excel spreadsheet would work. If I have this cell here, and I want to merge these two, what I'm doing is I'm having this table cell span 2 columns, or sorry, 2 rows, right? So if I come in here and I say format, merge cell vertically, that is essentially merging these 2 cells together. And so when I do things like change the vertical alignment, you can see it goes to the top here and the bottom there because this is considered one cell, even though it's spanning multiple rows. I'm going to do the same thing here. I want this Butterfinger to go 2 rows. I'm going to go back to the grid here. So if you remember, I mentioned that there are these track columns, and they go between your these track markers, and they go between your columns. They actually also go between your rows. Oops. There it goes. So the way it works is it's kind of like the columns, except in this case, it goes vertically down. Your first row is always at the top. And then once again, it goes between all of your rows. So if you have 3 rows, you have one, the start, and then in between each row, and then one at the end. Okay. So whether it's columns or rows, basically you're going to have one more either track or row column, sorry, a column or a row track than the number of rows or columns you have, essentially. Hopefully that makes sense. So once again, if I go back here, it's like, I know it's, I kind of wish they would make them different colors, but it's like, see, that's row track 1, row track 2, row track 3, and then there should be one at the end, row track 4. So what we're trying to do is this Butterfingers is starting at row track 1, and we want it to go to row track 3. Once again, I want to specifically affect the child. So what I'm going to do is say Butterfinger grid row start, not a column start. And then once again, we can still use that span terminology. So if I say span 2, because we're applying it to the row and not the column, that means instead of spanning 2 columns, we're going to span 2 rows. Okay. So it's starting on 1 for Butterfinger, and then it's going to go 1 and then 2, and the result should be this. Okay. So you can see how, we are making our design here where, it's expanding rows and columns. Okay. Now that's one way to do this. I'm going to show you guys another way to do this. It's a little bit more specific, and you may see people, if you look at other people's code, you may see other people kind of do something like this. So I'm going to go and it's the same idea where it's like I have a 3-column, I'm going to have a 3-column layout, and I want a couple of my items to span more than one column or more than one row. Once again, I have these items here. They are children of this container. And what I'm going to do is let's make this container. I want to see what it looks like real quick. This is what it looks like by default. What I'm going to do is come into here and let's make this into CSS grid template columns. And let's use that new repeat that we talked about, 3-1FR. Once again, this means 3 columns. Each of that is 1 fraction long, which since there's 3 of them, and if each is 1 fraction, that means each column should be about 1/3 of the page. Let's go back, and that's what we get. Great. And we're still going to, another way to, instead of using the span value, is you could just actually list the markers. So once again, let's say that I wanted my Stephen King to span from here to here. Once again, this is my column marker 1, column marker 2, column marker 3, column marker 4. If I wanted to go from here to here, it's starting on 1 and it's ending on 3. So the way I could do this is I could say, okay, so I have this ID for King, because remember, we're applying this to the child. And grid column start 1. And then I could say where I want the column to end, grid. So in this case, these are the track column markers. Okay. So if it starts at 1 and ends at 3, I get something like that. If I wanted to go the whole width, I could go to 4. Okay. And the result's going to be that I get this going across my entire way. So either way works. This is a little bit more specific because you literally have to say the beginning and the end. In the last one, it was a little less because it doesn't say where you're starting from in terms of the column track or the row track. So either way it works. In this one, you just have to know how many columns you want to span. There are some times you might want to be more specific, but for this beginner level, it's fine. I think either one is really fine. We're going to do the same thing for rows. So I'm going to go back and set this back to track number 3. And I want to take this J.K. Rowling and I want to go 2 rows. Okay. And if you remember, so we have column markers and we also have row markers, right? And so it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what I want to do is I want to take the J.K. Rowling, which is starting on row marker 2, and I want it to go all the way to row marker 4. In other words, like I'm trying to get it to go 2 rows. Okay. So it's kind of similar to this other one, except instead of using grid column, we're going to use grid row start 2. And where do I want the track marker to end? Grid row end 4. All right. Once again, if I were to have this go longer than it actually has, you're gonna, in this case, I guess it doesn't do anything, but you can end up with some interesting kind of situations. I can even kind of, if I wanted this to go up here, I could do something where it's like, well, I wanted to start at, even though it doesn't normally start at marker 1, I can have it starts at marker 2. We can have it do that. So this would actually move it up a little bit. But I'm getting a little too in the weeds there. Okay. All right, one more kind of example that I kind of wanted to show you that kind of makes use of this. All right. The thing about grids is it's like, by default, you get kind of this equidistant, by default, when you have these layouts, every column, everything in that column is exactly the same width, right? Now you can merge cells together. So this is like kind of going the full width and this is kind of going the full width. But, what if I wanted something kind of like this, where each row kind of has a different division? So it's like these are a bunch of bands, and I kind of want it where like, all right, this is 1/3, this is a third, and this is a third. Sorry, I can't choose a better color. Maybe white would be better. I don't know. I don't know. Here, let's clean this up. There you go. Boom. All right. Third, third, third. And then this is kind of like half the page, right? So that's like half. And this is like 100%. And then this is like 3/4, and this is like 1/4. Okay. So it's like, how, what could we do with grids to get this? Now I could make just each of these like, their own individual grid, because grids don't affect each other. So it's like this is one grid, and then this is a second grid, and this is a third, and this is a fourth. I could do it that way, but that would require me adding some extra HTML to get that to work out and everything like that. We can actually kind of do all this with one grid. Okay, how would we do that? Well, what we want to do is set these up as percentages where they have a common denominator. This is like a middle school, early algebra thing, which is like, okay, if you have a third and a half and 3/4 and 1/1, which is 100%, what is the common denominator between all of these? Okay. And the answer is, well, what does 3, 2, 4, and 1 all equally go into? And the answer is 12. So what I could do is set this to 12 and then essentially figure out the percentage of that. So what I mean is like, okay, if the base is 12, each column here should be uh, 4 out of 12, right? 4 out of 12 is the same as 1/3, okay? If something is 1/2, that's 6 out of 12. If something is 1 out of 1, that's 12 out of 12. And if something is 3/4 of 12, that would be 9 out of 12. And the remaining third would be 3 out of 12, okay? So what does that have to do with anything? Well, you'll kind of see how we're going to do this. I'm going to go here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my columns. I'm going to set my CSS grid to have 12 columns. Okay. Display grid and then grid template columns. This is where repeat is helpful. We're going to say, okay, I got 12 columns and each one is one fraction. So I should get 12 equal rows when I do this. And I do. So you can't see all of them because I actually don't have 12 table cells, but it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. All right. So this obviously doesn't look good. So how can we fix this? Well, okay. In our first row, we determined, right, that each of these is a third. Okay. And we figured out that the third is 4 out of 12. How does that apply? Well, if you start at row marker 1, or sorry, column marker 1, for Black Sabbath, add the 1 for it. So it's, column marker 2, 3, 4, 5. What I could do is I could say, okay, grid column start 1, and then that's going to go to grid column end 5. Okay. And that's going to be 1/3 of the page. Boom. All right. Now, I'm going to do Jackson 5, which is just Jackson 5 as its selector. So Jackson 5. It's also going to go for columns, but once again, it's not starting on column marker 1, it's starting on column marker 5. If you want to double check, right click, inspect, just make sure that's on, and let's set that to blue. And you can see how it's starting on marker 5, right? So 5 plus 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. As I try really hard to put 4 fingers up. All right, so that would be grid column start 5, and then grid column end 9. All right, boom, looking good. All right, and we're just going to keep doing this, okay? So the last one in this row is the Ramones. I'm going to actually show you guys a little shortcut for this. So you could just keep doing this, or we could actually condense this into one line of code called grid col. Then what you do is you put the starting marker and then the end marker. So here, what I'm trying to do is I want the Ramones. There's got to be a way for me to set that internal color. It's starting at 9, and I'm going to go to 1, 2, 3, 4, column marker 11. So in other words, the shorthand for that would be this, okay? This is your starting marker, and this is your end marker. Oops. Oh, 13. Sorry, it should be 13. All right. These are 1/2, or 50%. We determined that's like 6 out of 12, right? So what does that mean? Well, if queen starts on column marker 1, which should, that's the one all the way on the far left, queen, that would mean, and I'm going to use the shorthand, it starts on marker 1, and we're adding 6, right? Because 6 is half of this layout here. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I don't think I saved. There you go. Deep Purple, one of my favorite 70s bands. I'm going to have that go to the rest, and it's going to start on 7. So once again, it's spanning 6 columns, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Boom. Oops, did I not save? Oops, I put R. It's always the little things. There you go. All right, Aerosmith goes the full width. So that's 12 out of 12. So if it starts on 1, it should end on 13. One out of 13. All right, boom. And then finally, Kiss is 3/4, and then ABBA is 1/4. We determined 3/4 is 9 out of 12, and the remaining is 3 out of 12. So if Kiss starts on column marker 1, and you add 9, 9 plus 1 is 10. Oops. And that should be 3/4. And then the remaining is 3. 10 plus, so it should start on 3 and then end at 13. So we're adding 3 to it. All right. So this is a design where not every row has to have exactly the same setup. This feels just a little bit more, it feels a little less boxy, I mean, it's up to you. Some people like having kind of perfectly lined columns. You could go back and forth. Maybe I kind of wanted to go 3 columns, 2 columns, 3 columns, 2 columns, something like that. But this is just kind of an way to do this. All right, so I want you guys to try that out. That is 8, 9, and 10, please. Okay.